Hey, my name is Zianni and today we'll be talking about wave management and how you can easily apply it to your games regardless of rank. We'll be covering minion calculations, slow push, freeze, crash, reset, bounce, and cannon waves today. Wave management is something that can be done actively the entire game, provided you know why you're doing it. This video will help you with understanding the fundamentals and making proactive decisions. The first step to achieving that is understanding the symbiotic relationship between jungle and laning. They can't really exist without each other. Your wave position should reflect what your goal in lane is, and you need to be asking yourself these questions. Do I need to be able to move? What am I moving for? Is moving even necessary? One of the biggest mistakes players will make is always pushing the wave, because they assume that priority equals winning lane. Priority is essentially right of way, being able to move first or having the first action. However, if there's nothing worth moving for, all you're doing is making yourself vulnerable to ganks because you're farther up in lane. In regards to the first question, just think about whether your jungle focuses more on ganking or more on farming. The more aggressive the champion, the more you'll need to move. Examples of an aggressive champion would be something like Kindred, Nidalee, Graves, Jarvan. For champions that focus on farming their own jungle, the less you need to move. Examples being Kayn, Diana, Fiddlesticks, and Master Yi. For the second, the only things we really move for as mid lane in the early game is Scuttle Crab, Invades, Dragons, Riftherald, and roaming if we want to. If we need to move for these things, we want to create a wave state that allows us to move first by pushing. If none of these things are happening, the only thing you're really accomplishing is making yourself gankable. Alright guys, we're going to do a hypothetical level 1 start. But essentially, let's just assume that both sides have officially leashed, and now we need to break down what the jungle champion is. So we have a early game aggressive jungler. Let's say it's a Kindred, it's a Jarvan, it doesn't really matter, it's just an early game jungler, and the enemy team has a false clear, camp clear. So it could be Fiddlesticks, it could be Kayn, it could be Diana, but there's a very big difference between the clear styles of those champions. We typically refer to those as 3 camps, 5 camps, 6 camps, and it just refers to how many camps you do before you actually gank. So the reason why you do 3 camps is because you hit level 3. So let's say that we have a Kindred. She could do red, she can do Gromp, and then blue buff, and she'd hit level 3. So when she finishes that, she's going to be around 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And most junglers will play for the Crab, which spawns at 3:15. So if they have 30 seconds of downtime, they kind of have 3 decisions from that point onwards. It's either they go back and do the camps that they skipped, they gank top, they gank jungle, or an invade as they were, or they gank mid lane. So if I have a 3 camp jungle on my team, and I'm playing mid lane, I need to kind of respect the idea that either I'm following through on an invade, or I want to set up a gank. Because theoretically, let's say that Jarvan is trying to level 2 gank mid lane, and I push mid. Is this a gankable lane? No, because the enemy mid laner is under tower. Now, I do have something called priority, which is I'm able to easily move to help with an invade because I have control of my lane. But given where my jungler currently is, does it matter if I have priority? The answer is no. Because if my jungler is right here, who fucking cares if I can move right now? Because it doesn't even matter. And that's where you guys get trapped in lower elos. You guys think that you always have to push because you always need priority. Priority is contextual. You don't always need it. If your jungler is in base coming off a respawn and you're all the way up here, the only thing that you're doing is making yourself very easy to gank because look how far pushed up you are. And you guys do this so consistently because you don't understand that this is wrong. If you do not need priority and you don't need to move, the best position to hold is on your own side of the map. Because if I'm holding this position right here, yes, I can't move, but it doesn't matter because look at how many possibilities your jungler has to gank your lane now, just because your wave is pushed into your tower. So here's the double-edged sword. I can't move, but look at where the wave is stabilized. The enemy mid laner has to walk all the way up here to farm, which makes them vulnerable to ganks. And it also means that if I trade aggressively or I position aggressively, so imagine that this line is the minion wave and I stand here, there's no way for the enemy mid laner to play the game, realistically. So, holding the wave on your side when there's nothing to do on the map is pretty much always going to be better. Now, if your jungler is in fact playing for the invade and wants to actually go for the invade, so hypothetically they just did 3 camps and now they're going for red buff steal, this is an example of when you would need priority. This is where you would push the lane, push the enemy under the tower so that you're making a 50-50 decision between they lose the minion wave or they rotate. So you get a win-win situation, but you're able to move and help the teammate. What are some other scenarios where we would need priority? If we're fighting for crab and they're both going for the same crab, you want to be able to move first. If you want to contest dragon, or your team is doing dragon, you want to make sure the enemy can't move and you can move first. If your team is invading, you want to have priority. If your team is at risk of being invaded by something like a Kindred and Nidalee, you do kind of want priority, but that does mean you'll also be gankable because they can just go on you instead. Because in a realistic game, if I have a 3-camp jungler, like we just talked about, they're done at 245. They have 30 seconds where they can do whatever they want, but the enemy jungler is playing a 5 or 6 camp, which means they're going to be doing blue, and then they'll be doing Gromp, and then they'll do Wolves, and from that point onwards, they're gradually moving towards the top side of the map. They typically finish their clear at 3 minutes to 3:15, which means that they'll either be late to crab or they'll be right on time. So when you're playing against a 5 or 6 camp jungler, like Fiddlesticks or Kayn, you can kind of assume that you'll get ganked after 3 minutes and 15 or around the 3-minute mark. If you're playing against a very aggressive jungler, you can kind of assume that you'll get ganked as soon as 2:30, or even 2:45 itself. So just understanding what jungler you're playing against or what jungle you have on your team allows you to play around it. Alright, so we're going to be talking about the general terminology for some of the words that we introduced earlier in the video. These are ways to apply wave management, essentially. The first thing we need to go over is going to be minion calculations, and the first step to that is pretty much combat power. So all you really need to do for this step is count how many minions there are, and once you do that, you have a number, which is 6 versus 6. This is wave 1. This is a equal wave, because it's the exact same amount of minions, and it is the same type. Caster minions are more valuable, so that can make a difference in a lot of lanes, but typically the way this works is whoever has more minions is more powerful. If this were 7 versus 5 instead, then 7 would win, and it would push towards the other player. So the whole point here is if you can count how many minions you are, or how many minions there is, you can pretty much tell whether a wave is pushing to you or pushing away from you. Now that is assuming that is a neutral lane state. So neutral is represented by this pretty much line right down the middle of the map. And the way this works is that every so bit of portion of the wall, so these little lines that I'm drawing right now on the screen, all represents pretty much +1. So the reason why this is because the closer you are to your nexus, the faster the minion wave gets there. So for every bit of ground that you're covering, the more minions you need to pretty much create a push or pull scenario. So this middle line is 0, and then we have +1, then we have +2. So once again, to reiterate, if my minion wave is stabilized right here, my minion wave is going to get there first because it's closer to nexus, it's closer to spawn, and the minion wave has to travel a lot more distance before it gets to this minion wave. So if this was 6 versus 6, this would push towards them no matter what because there's an invisible +2 or an invisible +1 depending on where the wave is. Because eventually those minions will group up and then it's going to be 12 versus 6. So that's a pretty easy way to understand that if you have a bigger number, the wave is going to push towards the other person. So the whole point here is that if we want to get priority, we need to have more minions than the other person. If we want to hold a safe spot, we want to make sure that they have more minions than us. So that is essentially minion calculations in a nutshell. The first wave manipulation technique we're going to be talking about is slow pushing, and essentially the way slow pushing works is that you're gradually pushing a wave. So that can be either towards you or it can be towards the enemy player. So in this example clip, you can see that the enemy player has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 minions. So this is 6 versus 8, which means that 8 will always win, so it will push towards me. Now the reason why this is important is because look at where my jungler is. On the map, he's currently above my lane, which means that he has a very good chance of ganking right now. And I also know where the enemy jungler is, so I don't need to move up top anyways because I already know where the enemy jungler is. So as long as I hold the wave here, or even here, this is a lot easier for my Kayn to gank, and it's a lot easier for my Pyke to gank. I don't need to move, which means that this position is ideal for me. So the whole point of slow pushing is that you can kind of control the momentum of the lane, but you can also do in the reverse. So if I wanted to get a really big stacked up wave, I can gradually build up a wave state and then push it towards the enemy. And the cool thing is, once you crash that wave or you send it towards the enemy, you can go run and do something else because they have to deal with killing 12 minions. Otherwise, a slow push just generally means that it is pushing towards you with momentum. So that is the key word there, is just there is momentum behind that wave, and it is 100% going to be going towards you or towards them. So you can see an example here, but as long as this guy is forced to move far up, Pain can gank him from above, or my Pike can roam. So you're going to see the result of me holding a slow push. It doesn't result in a kill, but at the end of the day, the victor is forced to recall, so he's going back to base. He doesn't have TP, so he's just going to continue to lose minions. And this is the second technique, which is technically called a freeze. So right now, we're going to count the minions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 minions on my side versus 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this 9 is always going to win, and it's going to push towards me, which means that I have a pretty big advantage, right? As long as there's more minions on their side, the wave is guaranteed to be towards my side of the map, which means he has to walk all the way up here to farm, which makes him vulnerable to ganks and means I am ungankable because nobody can touch me under tower. So the difference between a slow push and a freeze is that slow push is momentum, whereas a freeze is you're just maintaining a position completely. So as long as they have a combat power advantage that I'm managing in terms of not letting it overboard, I can just hold the wave here indefinitely. So we'll just continue to watch here, but you'll pretty much see the result of this is that Victor continues to lose minions, and I maintain a CS advantage. So even if my cannon dies here, it's currently 7 versus 11, which is still in my favor. You're going to see I'm culling some of these minions, and I'm starting to gradually push the wave back a little bit. But as long as I hold to this line, this is a slow push towards him now, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 versus 7. But my wave is closer, so I have that invisible combat power, which means eventually it will push towards him. But it doesn't matter right now because it's a slow momentum push, which means that it gradually builds up over time. So even though the wave is right here, I still have 15-30 seconds before it actually builds up to the point where it's going to start pushing in. So my Pike is heading towards mid lane. He gets a free gank here because there's nothing Victor can do here. He's trying to fix the wave because he knows he's fucked. And as a result of this, you see that he's super far overextended. Now he does have flash, but the flash doesn't matter because once he burns this, he no longer has a defense mechanism. So he's all the way up here trying to farm and push the wave in, which means that he's super vulnerable to ganks. And there's this entire distance that he has to cover to get back to safety. So he just dies here. Okay, now he does technically get away, but then he walks back and kills himself. This is a GM game, by the way. But this is the result of holding a slow push and then creating a freeze out of it. So that's an example of wave manipulation. And a very good example of when you don't need priority, you can just hold the wave here and create indefinite like gank opportunities for your teammates. Because if I'm pushing into the enemy tower here, I'm able to move, but I'm not doing anything with that pressure. So the only thing I'm doing is allowing the enemy jungler to get gank chances on me. Okay, so we just killed Victor, and the next step is the next methodology, which is called crashing. Crashing is essentially where you just push your wave in, and that creates multiple opportunities. The first one really is the ability to go roam, because while this wave is dying to tower, you're not losing anything because there's no minions in lane, so you can go top, you can go jungle, you can go place a ward. So it's a roam timer, it's a ward timer, and it also gives you a reset timer. So these are all moments where you can do something without losing anything at all. And I achieve this by just pushing the wave in and then leaving. But if I stay here, I'm just kind of doing nothing because I'm waiting for the next wave to come in, which could be as soon as 10 seconds to 15 seconds, depending on how close the wave was when you crashed it. But that is crashing in a nutshell. It's just basically pushing the wave. So this is a fun mechanism, but it's called a bounce. A bounce is essentially where you create a situation where the wave pushes in, and then it bounces back towards you like a rubber band. So you push it in, and then it pushes back. So the reason why this happens, and the way you can tell that this is happening, is that when the enemy wave groups up to kill your minion wave under tower, you're creating a situation where it's stacked up. So you see all 7 of these minions are grouped up, they're all on top of each other, which means they're all going to do damage as soon as they get into combat. And then you take a look at this blue wave, it's the exact same amount of minions, but the difference is that it's still in Congo line. So you'll watch as this breaks out, but they immediately target onto the first minion. All 7 of these minions are hitting a minion before these minions are even in position to hit. And now you're in a situation, despite doing literally nothing, where you have a combat power advantage where it's going back into a slow push. So bouncing is about creating a situation where the wave naturally gravitates back towards you so that you can go ahead and redo it all over again and just hold that position again. Because I'm going to get back to lane, there's no way he pushes this in time, and then I can just set up another freeze. Because no matter what this guy does, he can't stop this wave from pushing. So what does he do when he has no flash? Basically nothing. Because if he wants to fix this wave state, he has to push this into my tower and crash it, so that he can either equalize it or get it moving back towards him. But he doesn't have a jungler to help him do that. His jungler is focusing towards bot side, so what happens if my jungler or my support sits around my lane? We just get another kill for free. So this guy eventually will probably get ganked. But as you can see right now, my wave state is just held right here, and he has to move really far up with no sums to get away from that. So just once again, holding a miniature freeze. It's not really a freeze because I don't have enough of a minion advantage to hold it indefinitely. That's pretty much what a freeze is. But it's definitely going to be continuously slow pushing towards me until it gets fucked up. So he's forced to move up, he just dies again, and there's really nothing he can do about it because it's either he loses entire waves of CS waiting for his jungler to fix it, or he dies trying to fix it. And that's why creating a bounce is so valuable when you have a summoner advantage. Alright, here we have an example of an aggressive version. Obviously the Veigar is a bit more of a just wait for your jungler to gank, but when you need to have priority and you want to help a jungle matchup like a Talon versus Hecarim, typically you want to play aggressively so that you can build up waves. And you do this often in range versus melee matchups where you do a slow push off of wave 1 so that you have a level advantage and you can group up a bunch of minions. And the reason why you do this is because you're now forcing a situation where the Sylas has to contest the wave while being down a level, and he has to kill all these minions at the exact same time. So you're going to see an example here of a slow push happening in real time, but for an aggressive purpose. So this wave is gradually pushing towards him, and then I can crash it all at once, and then I have 2 options. I can trade on every single one of those minions under his tower, and he has to do it because he's going to lose the minions otherwise, or I can let the wave bounce back, and I can create basically a push towards me where he can get ganked. Now, I want to be able to move and help my jungler if we're doing an invade or if we're fighting for crab. So this game, I pretty much always push the wave so that I'm always able to move, but it does make me vulnerable to ganks as a result of it. So here, you see, I'm kind of making a decision. What do I want to do? But I'm a level up. He's walking up the farm, so he gets chunked out. And it's just really fucking hard for him. But right now, I'm in a position where I can move very easily. And I have a minion advantage, so he'll eventually just lose minions for leaving. That's kind of what my goal is. Now, both junglers went to the opposite side of the map, so priority no longer matters. It doesn't matter if I'm able to move first, because there's nothing that can happen where I actually need to move. So the best step here would to allow the wave to push back, but I don't recognize that we're splitting the map on opposite sides, so I kind of just continue to push for literally no reason. So I'm accomplishing nothing with this positioning. The only thing that this allows me to do is hit him under tower when he goes up to last hit, but I can do the exact same thing, but over here without him being able to farm at all. Because you're basically letting them farm under tower, whereas if you zone them off the wave entirely by holding the wave in a really bad spot for melees, they just can't play the game. So this is a very common mistake that I make usually, because I don't pay attention to where junglers start since I'm streaming. But you can pretty much see that I'm gankable during this entire interaction, and if Hecarim just skipped his fucking Krugs and went mid lane, I would probably lose flash. And that's why it's a symbiotic relationship, is that jungles and laners have to work around each other's positioning and each other's lane states. So I just continue to bully this guy under tower. I've been pushed in the entire time. But once again, do I need to move for anything? Fuck no. There's literally nothing I can move for on the map besides like a roam to kill a laner. But it's too early for that to happen in the first place. So this continuous position of aggression is meaningless. It doesn't matter if I have priority here, so why not hold the place in an ungankable position? If I was fighting for crab and I needed to move for crab, then perfect, but once again, I'm just accomplishing nothing with my current wave state. So I get ganked here, and the only reason why this is happening is because my wave is pushing towards him. I don't need to be pushing towards him right now because my jungler is literally ganking bot lane. So if I'm not going to play around my jungler's position or play around my own goal, I'm just not playing proactively at all. Now, fortunately, he waited until the wave equalized, and this is pretty much Hecarim's fault, right? He waited until I was out of this position because he wanted to do Krugs, he wanted to do like fucking Scuttle Crab, but he had so many opportunities to gank me before this moment. And I finally realized with my talent going bottom that I was going to start playing a little bit more passively, and he lost his opportunity to gank. So this is an example of aggressive slow pushing and what you can create out of it. I obviously did not play it ideally, but eventually it worked out because they also did not play around it properly. Alright, so essentially when it comes to cannon waves, you just kind of need to understand that cannons are the easiest wave to recall on, especially if you equally like clear out the waves. And the reason why this is because it takes a long time to kill cannons. Early on in the game, they have 1000 HP, and then they also absorb a lot of tower shots. So in order for this Poppy to punish me for dying trading 1 for 1, she has to push that wave, and then she has to crash this wave as well. And during this time period, I lose pretty much 1 minion before I get back to lane, and I get absolutely everything. So this tower takes 8 shots to kill this cannon. That's 1. That's 2. That's 3. That's 4. That's 5. And it would have taken another 2 if I wanted to. But essentially, if you recall on a cannon wave early on against a champion that is incapable of clearing it, you can recall for free and just run back to lane. So people will do this a lot when they're playing mana-hungry champions, or they just need to reset and buy a quick item. But anytime you're in a... Basically, you have the opportunity to reset on a cannon wave for an item that's important, you can do so for free, because the enemy mid laner has to make a decision about trying to punish you for leaving, or they just let the minion wave sit mid and you lose maybe 3 minions at most. So cannon waves, pretty good wave to recall on. Great wave to recall on. If this video helped, please leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. If you have any questions that I did not answer in this video, I didn't really go in-depth on roaming with priority, but I'm here to answer it in the comment sections. Thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a good one.